believe what was happening. I never saw it coming. You made your choice. Now why should you fret? What you wanted is what you get. When I hear it floating on, I lose concentration. I picture the window all over the place. Yellow.
Sorry, the 98.3 and 104.7. This is where we get interactive with the program Morning Comrade. But this time around is not the opposition leader, former Prime Minister St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in studio with us. It's former Finance Minister, the brother Camillo Gonsalves, here in studio with us until the Comrade leader comes back on Wednesday. Yeah. So good morning, my good brethren. The man who always run. Anyway, let me not go there.
Morning, comrades. It's good to be here on the radio. It's June 1st, the start of June, best month of the year. Middle of the year, best month of the year that I'm born. So, you don't know, big year. And as Bling said, I'm filling in today for the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, our Comrade leader. Dr. Gonsalves is out of the country. Comrade Ralph has been in Guyana. He is in a couple of other countries before he returns. I guess he will be the one to update you. But he is continuing to meet on some very substantive matters with heads of government from across the Caribbean region. I don't want to say who he's meeting with and who he's talking to, because he will decide whether or not those meetings should be something that he discuss on the radio. I haven't discussed that with him, so I don't know if these things are things to be discussed or not. But he should be back by the Wednesday program. So I am your night watchman today for the Monday program. The day watchman. And I'm very, very happy to have the opportunity to be on Star Radio. I don't come on often, but when I do, I try to have a lot to say, a lot of substance for the people who might be listening, and I'll try to do that again today. And try to stay positive. One of the things I was listening, I heard your Man Sick song there. I was listening to a lot of Bob Marley this weekend, Blink. And that Man Sick song reminded me of the Bob Marley song where he said, "Now you get what you want. Do you want more?" That's a question. But another point that Bob always makes, he makes in a song, he says, if you get up and you quarrel every day, you're saying prayers to the devil. I say, why don't you help another one along the way and make it easier?
Man, sound like you know reggae music.
That's a little bit easier. Well, I know my reggae music. And so I don't want to wake up and quarrel every day. I have a few things to say, but I also have a few positive things to say. And I want to big up everybody across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's a beautiful day. Sun is shining. We could do it a little more rain, but it's a beautiful day today. Big up the farmers who are out there toiling to make sure that we have food on our table. Big up the fisher folk who are out on our seas right now.
Yep.
Dangerous waters. You never know when an American bomber is over your head. But big up our fisher folk, big up our farmers, big up everybody who is going to work today, making a living for their family. Big up everyone who's listening to Morning Comrade. And give thanks. We woke up today. We have health, we have strength, we have the ability to turn on the radio and listen. And I think we give thanks for all of these things. And as my Rasta brethren say, you give thanks to the giving of thanks. A few things I want to mention before we start off, with the substance of the program. I want to acknowledge the passing of Renwick Rose. Renwick Rose was a titan, a giant in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He's not a giant in stature, but a giant in impact in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Teacher, journalist, public intellectual, writer, author, fighter. And that's probably what he would want to be remembered as, a fighter for the working people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and particularly the banana farmers and those who get their hands dirty when they make a living in this country. Renwick was also the epitome of principle. He spoke the truth, he spoke his truth without fear or favor. And sometimes you agreed with him and sometimes you disagreed with him, but you always knew that he was giving you honest and unvarnished facts as he saw them. And if you ever read a newspaper in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you owe a debt of gratitude to Renwick Rose. And if you ever ate a banana since the 90s, when they were trying to take away our preferential access and succeeded in doing that to the European market, you have Renwick to thank. And if you were a trade unionist, a believer in solidarity and the common good, social democracy, Renwick. If you believe in these perilous times for Cuba, that the people of the Caribbean have to stand with the people of Cuba in resisting the threats and the intimidation and the aggression perpetuated against the Cuban people. If you believe that we as people of the Caribbean must stand together and support peace and support self-determination and sovereignty, then Renwick again was the person who articulated those positions for us to understand, for us on the international stage, and always for us. Renwick decided not to accept many roles in past administrations because he wanted to be honest and pure and true to himself and not to any administration's political desires or whatever. And Renwick was an absolute giant. And he had a very long battle with illness and nonetheless managed to live a long life. And I hope that we find the appropriate way to memorialize and remember Renwick's contribution so that future generations will ask us, who was Renwick Rose? And we can talk about these contributions and we can talk about what real patriotism means and what real sacrifice means and what real investment in your country and your people looks like in a tangible way, not in some kind of distant way. And I know that these are the days when they seem to want to rename things from Independence Park to Victoria Park, reverse time. But I hope that we can find something tangible and meaningful and lasting to honor giants like Renwick Rose. And I hope that people are already thinking about what sort of recognition we can give for this man, not for himself, because Renwick might probably say, "Me want them thing there," because he was a humble man, but so that other generations, so that people who never knew Renwick could see the name and say, "Who was Renwick?" And that's important to me, that we honor people and that we honor principles that we should hold dear as Vincentians and as people of the Caribbean civilization. I think it's an important thing that we should do. Maybe right now people want to be asked who was Victoria and who was Princess Margaret and, who was Murray and who was Sharp. Maybe those are questions. Maybe those are the people that some people want us to honor. But I would rather honor people like Renrick, who worked every day to make our country better in real and tangible ways, intellectually and tangibly and physically and measurably better. So rest in peace, Renrick, for your fight, for your honesty, for your courage. I think we have to remember great people. But I ain't gonna quote the busy signal. I quote the original Born in Spare. Let us recall some great men who've been fighting for our rights. And he's certainly one of those great men who fought every day for the rights of Vincentians. And we have to, I don't think there's debate about this. I don't think this is not something that is controversial or political or anything like that. I think that we should all agree, or we could all agree, that Renrick was a great man and deserves whatever great accolades and recognition we can give him in our own modest way in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So big up Renrick, big up the whole family. I won't say in public what I've said in private to the family, but I think we should publicly recognize Renrick, but I don't need to discuss private conversations. Along the same lines, the 29th of May was the birthday of the late, great Maurice Bishop. And if I recalling great men, I got to recall great men. So we have to remember, in the same vein that we remember Renrick, we have to remember the titans who have emerged in the Caribbean. Maurice was born on May 29th, 1944. So he would have been 82 years old if he had not been assassinated and if he had survived. Maurice, another courageous statesman, another man willing to put his life on the line for his people, another man who was invested in transformation, transformative change for his people. And another man, and this will be one of the themes of when I get into what I talk about today, another man who was interested in big ideas for change. Because when you have your moment on the stage of life, you can do some little incremental thing in the margin, you could do a little thing here, a little thing there, and move on and be forgotten. Or you can try to make a significant, tangible, meaningful change. Nationally, if you have that opportunity, in your family, if you have that opportunity, in your village, if you have that opportunity. But Maurice Bishop was a man who had big ideas and big dreams and big hopes and large ambitions for the Grenadian people, for the Caribbean people, and for the colonized and exploited people of the world. And it is that spirit, the spirit of Maurice, the spirit of Renrick, that we have to capture and harness when we're facing some of the challenges that we're facing now. True. And I'm not interested in coming here and squabbling. I'm also not interested in coming here and campaigning, because the time for campaigning is not now. It's not now. Time for campaigning is cyclical. It will come again. But between then and now, the time for educating, the time for discussing ideas, the time for sharing suggestions, the time for sharing ambitions for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for the Caribbean, even for the world. Yep. That's the time now. And when you have an educated and aware population, it makes the campaigning side of things easier. True. Man Sick was just singing a song there as if he was disappointed in the electorate for the choices that they made. Well, I'm disappointed, obviously, at the results of the last election. But we bear responsibility, because if we had done some of the educational work, if we had done some of the awareness lifting, if we didn't simply assume that people understood what we understood, maybe the even if the result was the same, maybe the conversation around the election would have been better, would have been more enlightened, would not have been $500 for if you make baby and VAT-free day and those kind of things. Maybe the conversation would have been more uplifting, and the result of that conversation would have been more positive for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we have a responsibility, and we have this responsibility going forward to uplift and to educate. Of course, as Comrade Ralph says, one must oppose, one must depose. But I'll focus today on the fact that one must also propose ideas, propose concepts, propose adjustments. Because I don't want anybody to suffer for 5 years just so my party can take advantage of misery in 5 years and get reelected. No. I want everybody to do better every day. And when that time comes again, it always comes, people will be more appreciative of what they had, more appreciative of differences, and also more appreciative, hopefully, of all the ideas and suggestions that we came up with over the time that we were gone. So, big up Morris, big up Renrick, big up Morris. Want to say happy Fisherman's Day. Fisherman's Day was Monday gone. To me, it was a little bit more subdued than it normally was. But it didn't have anything in Caliqua. Normally, there's a big thing in Caliqua. But I think they had it mainly in Tongue this year. So maybe it was big and it just wasn't close to me. But whether it was big or small, it's very important that we recognize the invaluable contributions of our fisher folk and the fact that they put healthy, affordable protein on our tables all across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And in this time when price is going up everywhere and quality going down everywhere, it's good to remember your fisherman. It's good to remember that you can get fresh snapper, fresh tuna, just in your own community. Something that people in other countries can't get or pay top dollar for. When I say top dollar, I mean way more than we are paying for fresh fish. So big up our fisher folk and the contribution that they make. Speaking of Caliqua, I want to big up the artists who painted the mural on the wall outside of the Caliqua playing field. This is something that is years in the making, and I'm glad to see it finally come to fruition. It's come to fruition in a slightly different way than was originally envisaged, but it's pretty nonetheless, and I want to big it up. I want to big up because I didn't hear them mentioned, but the idea to turn that wall, after it was built, that wall had been destroyed, dilapidated, the fence was hanging over any road. After that wall was rebuilt and refurbished by the past administration, during our last term in office, if you look in the budget, you will see something that was a budget item called, I think it was called Beautification of Layou, Barrowley, and Caliqua towns. And the reason that existed was we thought that those were the towns that would be the first point of contact for tourism. If you come in from Argyle, the airport, the first town that you hit would be Calico. If you're staying in Beachcombers or Paradise or what the other one on the name again? Beachcombers, Paradise. There's also French Veranda. There's which one is it? Mariners. Well, that's and one more that is slipping my mind right now. Sunset Shores. If you're staying there, or Young Island, the closest town to you is Calico. And similarly, as we were developing tourism on our leeward coast, Sandals, we had planned with the Marriott, with the Beaches Resort, the towns that would have been most adjacent to those areas would be Layu and Barley. And we thought that it would be a good idea to spend some money to upgrade and update those towns so that when tourists come, because it's not to please the tourists, don't get it wrong, but that when tourists come, they will feel comfortable venturing out of the resort and going into these towns and spending their money in the local community shops and services and entertainment and all the rest of it. So we created something in Calico called an aesthetics committee. And some of the people in the committee, they deserve mentioning today, because I don't know if they were mentioned at the time that the mural was unveiled or inaugurated or whatever. But the aesthetics committee had Clayton Borgin on it, Michael Oliver, Kim Duggan, Foster Hannibal, Roger Young, Chanel Mackenzie, Winfield Tanis Abbott, Richard Cato, Dr. Linton Lewis. There are a few more. But it was a large committee of people from Calico. And they had a number of suggestions for the area, some of which you had already seen from beforehand. For example, all those road signs that are in Calico that were put up last year or the year before. That was the product of recommendations from that aesthetics committee. That sign as you enter Calico, coming up across from Howard Marine over there, the Calico sign by the road, that was a product of the aesthetics committee. And they had made suggestion, and I'll just read it from the last minutes that I could find on my computer, because I want to big them up for the work that they've done. I'm looking at the minutes from a meeting, I think it's last year, April. Well, I have two here, one from April and one from May, that were held in the Calico Town Hall with all of those people that I just said. And they had put up, again, the directional signs. They'd already done that. The Welcome to Calico sign, one at Howard's. They wanted another one at Four Shells. That one was not completed, but we hope it's still to be completed. They wanted a reflective safety barrier to be put on the corner by the Diamond Stretch near the Holiday Inn Express. That's outside of East St. George, but it was a suggestion. I thought it was a good suggestion. They were in the process of establishing a partnership with Reno to beautify the green area next to the bus shed at Howard's. And about the mural, I'm just reading directly from the minutes of the meeting that I found. It was point 8 in this meeting. A mural on the northern fencing wall of the Calico playing field, located adjacent to the main road, to honor the various individuals who made outstanding contributions to the development of the community. The wall measures 257 feet long by 3 feet 2 inches high. The mural, this was their suggestion. It varied ultimately, but this was their suggestion at the time. The mural will depict several categories under which the pictures and names of some of the honorees and names of others listed will be displayed. So the idea for the mural was mainly to have faces of famous people from Calico immediately and the immediate surroundings. A lot of portraits of these people, and then names. Not just the portraits, but you couldn't put everybody on the wall, so they also wanted just some names to be listed. And at the time of this meeting, the suggestions that they had were in the area of fishing, Fitzroy Goodluck, whose picture would be on the wall, Dennis Simmons, Piper. A lot of people in Calico know who Piper is. I don't know Piper's real name. Arthur Oliver. In sports, they wanted to have up Oswald Nanton, Gosnell Cupid, Dr. Linton Lewis, Cecilia Richards. All of their pictures would be on the wall, but then also the names of people like Alex King and Roger Gurley and Kelly Lucas and Richard Cato and Clarence Thomas and Randolph Sticky Williams and Patricia Robinson and Maxwell Diggers Bennett and McNeil Morgan, who you might know as Taste. In culture, they wanted paintings of Randy Luther McIntosh, Chanel Mackenzie, Patrick Gray, Batiste. Gray had recently left us. Giant in Pan. Johnny Pompey, we call JP. Johnny was not to have his picture on the wall, just his name. George Sambo Smart, Audley Gringo Bennett, Torquay, Cyril Devil Lewis, Michael Oliver. The humanitarian area, humanitarian and political and so on, they wanted Eric Taylor Alexander, Rebecca Cato, Vaughn Tony, Vordine Gurley, Clayton Borgin, John Duggan, Posse. What's Posse real name? Posse, Boozer, Milton Mayers, Anita Nanton, Lorna McBarnett, Miss Sita, Foster Hannibal. In health, they wanted Inol Smart, Winfield, Carmen Cambridge, Cynthia Cato Lucas. In business, they wanted John Duggan, Thaddeus John, Tony's Minimart, Margaret Dare, Jacinta Mitchell, Frank Lewis, Amanda Robinson, Olive Carter. So the vision at the time, this was over a year ago, was to do a mural on the wall honoring many people who helped build the community of in Calico and the immediate surroundings. Over time, it's clearly the vision evolved where you just put a few faces up there. You don't have their names, but you have their faces. And then you do some more sort of nature and things from further away. Not necessarily just Calico. You have Soufriere up there. You have other things. So you have a mixture, and that's fine. I'm not criticizing it. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about bigging up the people who came up with the idea, and bigging up the people who were shepherding that idea all along the way. Big up Rainforest Seafood for sponsoring it. That is, originally we had put money in the budget to do it because we were using Rainforest to buy the engines for the fishermen, for Fisherman Day. So they had the money that they always contribute at Fisherman's Day, and instead they were asked to contribute it this time as to support the artists, and that's fine. I'm not arguing with anybody over that. But I want to big up Rainforest Seafood for their corporate responsibility, and big up the people who came up with those ideas. And those people, that aesthetics committee, came up with other ideas for that area that I hope we will also follow through on. For example, there is a fully designed bus stop, and the funding was already organized at the time. I don't know what the story is now. Right next to the Calico playing field right now, right by the crosswalk, it looks a little rundown at the moment, especially now that you've made this beautiful mural. There's a design. The design is a modern bus stop, and attached to the bus stop are shops to accommodate the two people who are selling drinks and so on from a cart there now. So the idea was to beautify the area, but not to move anybody, not to move the merchants the vendors who have started selling a little thing there, but to put them in more sanitary conditions, to put them in more appealing and attractive conditions, and make it easier for people to wait for the bus. Because right now, the vendors have kind of taken over the bus stop, and you're waiting on the road. And when rain falls, you have to run underneath by the playing field there. There's a little shed there by the pavilion and shelter yourself. The idea was it was a good idea by the aesthetics committee, and Benava Brown, who was then the minister responsible for these kind of urban development ideas. She had gotten a very beautiful bus stop designed, and I, as Minister of Finance, had set aside the money to build it, and I hope that we get that done. So big up the aesthetics committee who came up with this idea, and I hope that they continue to do that. There was, of course, a lovely event at Russell's auditorium a couple of weeks ago. 600 and odd people inside the building at the time. Blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. I did not expect to see, I tell you the honest truth, 6 months after a defeat, I did not expect to see that many people filling that venue. And the energy was absolutely electric. The speeches that were made were enlightening, and I want to big up everybody who turned out. Turned out in massive numbers for that event, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to know that activism and love of country are alive and strong, and that people are willing to come out and be seen and be heard and be counted as patriots. And as people who want the best for their party and for their country. So I want to big up everybody who turned out, big up the organizers. It was a lovely event, absolutely lovely. I know it's been discussed many times since then and now, so I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it now. But as I'm on the radio, I didn't want to gloss it over. We're still warming up, we're still just doing intro right now. I'm going to get to some of the issues that I want to talk about. But there are a few things that I always like to touch in the early warm, in the early run-ins of our conversation. I want to point people to something that's online. It's a long document, but it's easy to read, and I think you should read it in chunks, little bits. The Pope, and I burn a lot of fire on popes from long time till now. One of my favorite things to do is say fire upon the Pope. Burn a fire upon the Pope. Fire upon Rome, remember that one there? From Pope Paul and him scissors and comb. But the Pope, and I'm not a Catholic. I just want to say up front, I'm not a Catholic. I've never been a Catholic. My father is a Catholic. My mother was an Anglican. And I was baptized and grew up in the Anglican church. I'm not a Catholic. But the Pope wrote something called an encyclical, which is like a long letter. It's 43,000 words, they say. Called Magnifica Humanitas, which means magnificent humanity. And he posted it online. And you Google it, Pope, Magnificent Humanity, the whole thing come out there. You could read it at your leisure. And it's about preserving the human person, preserving humanity in this age of artificial intelligence and AI. And and not asking anybody to read it and turn Catholic, and not even asking anybody to read it and agree with everything that's in it. But when I began, I was talking about the need for us to have discussions and need for us to exchange large ideas and not get lost in the minutiae of things and not, they call it navel gazing. Don't study yourself so much. Don't watch your own navel so much that you don't look up and see what's going on around you. And there were a number of interesting things in the Pope's letter that I feel we need to discuss. And I'm not going to have a session about this thing right now, but I'm urging people to read it, even if you don't agree with the man. I don't have any love for the Vatican, none. But it was an interesting read. He says, for the first time, first Pope, who is the head of the Catholic Church, he says for the first time, I'm quoting him, "In the name of the Church, I sincerely ask for pardon." What is he asking for pardon for? Slavery. He says, "In the name of the Church, I sincerely ask for pardon." He apologizes for the role of the church in slavery. Now, he buried it way down in paragraph 176 out of mostly 250 paragraphs. It's buried in the middle of the document, but it's significant. It's significant as a starting point in the discussion of reparations, because it's more than begging pardon. It's more than asking for pardon, which is what he does there. Because apology without restitution is empty. Is empty. And he quotes the previous Pope, Pope Francis, separately in the document, but I put them together. He says, solidarity, when lived to its fullest sense, also means to restore to the poor what belongs to them. So he understands that coming after the apology is restoration. And restoring to the poor, restoring to the victimized what belongs to them. And that is the crux of the reparations argument. We don't want just to hear a fella in Rome say, boy, that was rough, boy. We get rich off all you. We sanctioned and built an elaborate theological apparatus to defend slavery, defend the slave economy, because the Catholic Church got rich off of slavery. The Anglican Church got rich off of slavery. And all the countries, all those governments got rich off of slavery and impoverished us in the Caribbean and impoverished Africa. The root of it is slavery. The extension of it is colonialism. But we have to get back to the root. And the Anglican Church has apologized. They apologized for their role in slavery. Formally, it's not the Pope. The Anglican Church thing called, not the Pope, but their Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Archbishop apologized a few years ago, and I think they set up some fund, £100 million or something, to pay into countries that have been impacted by slavery. £100 million is not a lot of money, but it is an important gesture that the Anglican Church realize you don't just apologize, you offer restitution. And there are some other churches that have apologized in the past and done nothing. The Southern Baptist Church in America, that church was founded in the time after the Civil War to say we ain't want black people in the church, should we? That was a church designed to support slavery and to exclude black people. They apologized for saying we were wrong to set up a church for slave owners. But they didn't put any restitution to that. They just said it. We can't let the Catholic Church, which was one of the chief beneficiaries and architects of the justifications for slavery, we can't let them off the hook that easily. But it's an important first step. They have expressed regret. They said they'll change behavior. Those are things you have to do. And you apologize, You have to accept responsibility. You have to express regret. You have to change your behavior. And you have to make restitution. And they're on the way to making their apology real. But we have to tell them that they have to do more than say words and say, I beg your pardon. They have to show through tangible action that the exploitation of black people for hundreds of years was a moral stain on an institution that says it is to promote God's word. And it's an acceptance by the Catholic Church. The Pope is supposed to be infallible, which means the Pope does not make mistakes. The Pope speaks for God. But many popes justified slavery and said they were doing that on behalf of God. We have to use this language. If the people who justified it are abandoning that justification, they must show now by their action that they believe restitution is necessary. Because when they do that, if the Anglican Church can apologize and offer restitution, if the Catholic Church can apologize and offer restitution, what about all the countries that benefited from slavery? When I walk through London in England and I see all the grand buildings, so often I think, how much of this was slave money that built this? How much of this was built because they profited from the labor of enslaved people? When I walk through Portugal, the Netherlands, I ask that question. And when I see the condition in which the countries and the societies and the peoples were pillaged, raped, and murdered, and displaced, I ask myself how much of those lingering problems that we have are the result of actions that were done back then with the blessing of governments and churches. And this restitution, this reparation, this reparatory justice conversation is going to be a long conversation, but it must never be one that we ignore. As you know, Comrade Ralph has a leading role to play and is playing a leading role in the reparations discussion throughout the Caribbean. I believe he was in Jamaica doing some work on this maybe a month ago. I know he's going to be in another country maybe today or tomorrow in the Caribbean dealing with the same issue of reparations. Slavery took hundreds of years. Reparations ain't going to happen overnight. But it is something we have to fight for. And I welcome the Pope's discussion. And I welcome the Pope saying, I was wrong. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Forgive me. I beg your pardon. I welcome that. But that is just the first half a step of the first step. And we must use that for the church, but more importantly, for the states, for the countries that benefited from slavery and exploited slavery. The same document by the Pope talked about how colonialism is assuming new forms. It's not just now to dominate your body, but to dominate your data, transform your personal lives into information that they can exploit. talked about if technology becomes the ultimate criteria, the human person risks being reduced to data, a cog in a machine, or a commodity. But if technology is integrated with a wise perspective, it can become an instrument of growth, justice, and fraternity. These are important things that we have to talk about. He attacks capitalism in his encyclical. He said the Catholic Church has never recognized that you have an absolute right to private property. It says that the value of the human being is worth more than the profit of a corporation. And you can't fire people and displace people and cut them off for economic benefit or for political benefit. Because the person has value. Every human being has value. And you have to recognize that value and don't push people around like pawns and exploit people.
Sure.
Read it. You could talk for days about it, but I like I say, I bond the Pope and the Vatican. I want to elevate it to that level. But I want us to understand the importance of the ideas being discussed. And the most of the document is about artificial intelligence. And we have to discuss artificial intelligence in this country. We have to discuss how mental slavery in the past was something that was imposed on you. Now we are volunteering to be mentally enslaved. Now we will spend so much time staring at our phone. I do it. Sometimes you're in traffic, you stop for a few minutes at behind a car and you reach for your phone just to see if you get a little update or something, what somebody just posted. And you feel like you're in control, but you're not. Because there are algorithms working in the background determining what you see and how you react to what you see. When you post something on Facebook, you might say, why everybody on Facebook are always so vexed? People are always cussing. People are always arguing with one another. So much a bad mind. That's an algorithm that has valued and prioritized negative comments over positive comments. And they show it to you because they think that things that rile you up will make you more likely to also comment or to share or to like or to send it to somebody else and say, can you believe this? And so there is something in the background. It's not just a conversation happening. There's something in the background controlling what you see and what you hear and how you respond. And the sense of validation that you get when you see the little hearts going up, the likes or the shares. This is all to control conversations and to turn our dialogue more negative. I watch sometimes things on online and I'm shocked that human beings will say some of the things that they say online. They wouldn't say it to your face. I know that because I meet some of them who cuss me. And when I see them to the face, they can't say it. They can't say the things they say about me in private. Online. There's something empowering to these people. They feel they could say anything or do anything, chat any kind of ignorance. We have to talk about how we are being manipulated by artificial intelligence. It's not just Facebook. It's not just ChatGPT. It's in everything we do. How many times in a day do you click, I accept cookies on your website? Every time you click that, you're telling the computer, you can study me, you can take my data, you can analyze me, all in exchange for showing me this little bauble, this little attraction that I really want to see right now. Every time you do it. Yes, I accept cookies because I want to read this thing or I want to see this video. But every time you do it, you're giving away a little bit more of yourself to a machine. And you don't know what the machine is going to do with that piece of yourself. When I talk about these things, in the last election, there were two manifestos. Well, there were three manifestos because the ULP had a manifesto and then it had a youth manifesto. and then the New Democratic Party had a manifesto. Both the ULP manifestos talked about AI. There was a whole section in both of the manifestos on artificial intelligence and technology, and how we have to embrace the best of artificial intelligence, but regulate the worst of artificial intelligence. How we have to take advantage of the things that it can do for us, but also limit the things that it can do to our children, our workers. One of the Pope's points is that AI could almost do everybody's work just now, Does that mean that it should? I'm a lawyer. AI could do all my work as a lawyer. So should all lawyers go home? AI can program computers now. Should all programmers go home? These are conversations that we need to have. And the ULP, in both of its manifestos, laid out a plan for how we should treat with AI in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The other party didn't say anything about it. It's as if it didn't exist. But not saying something about it doesn't mean they're not aware of it. And sometimes today, you, the listener, the viewer, the engaged and informed citizen, and me, the citizen, we are watching men and women speak, but we are hearing the words of artificial intelligence through their mouth. We are being catfished into thinking that we're listening to people's ideas, but we're actually listening to AI. We all see it. We go online, we see all of these pictures that were clearly drawn by AI. But we say, that's fun, that's cool, that's nice. But sometimes our own leaders are standing in front of podiums and microphones, but it's not their words. It's somebody else's words, or something has provided the words. And you have to wonder, who is leading who? I ain't talking about editing, I ain't talking about just taking a few words and cleaning up the grammar. I'll give you an example. I put a recent statement. I'm not going, you'll figure out whose, but this is not the point. So I don't want to trash anybody. But I put a recent statement into ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT, essentially with the right prompts, did you write this? I'm going to read a part of what it says. I'm on ChatGPT right now on the app. And after I put in the speech, it says, what makes me suspect AI? 1, the phrasing occasionally sounds like ChatGPT. There are several passages that have classic LLM fingerprints. LLM means large language model. That's the AI. So there are several passages that have classic AI fingerprints. Quote, we chose accountability over excuses, unquote. Merit over patronage, unquote. From pressure to progress, from uncertainty to stability, from rescue to resilience, unquote. ChatGPT says those slogans like contrast are extremely common in ChatGPT generated political speeches. Goes on. Number 2, excessive explanatory restatement. A striking feature of this passage is the repeated pattern. Quote, we will enforce strict standards. That is to say, or we will put merit over patronage. That is to say, and ChatGPT says, this resembles AI trying to ensure clarity by rephrasing every statement in simpler language. Human political speech writers often trust the audience more and don't repeatedly translate every sentence into simpler wording. Then it goes on, point 3. Some transitions are strangely generic. For example, unquote, what does this mean in practical terms, unquote? For households, this means, unquote. For small businesses, unquote. ChatGPT says this is exactly the sort of framing an LLM uses when trying to improve readability. Very consistent with an AI-assisted speech. Now, I'm going to go into who said it. Some people will figure out who said it. Some people won't care. The point of the matter that I'm trying to get to is not that somebody gave you an AI speech. The point that I'm getting to is that when you're watching a human being that you know and trust say words that are not theirs, and they are not even a speech writers, but they are a computers, you are listening to a computer. And do you want a machine to govern you? That's the question I'm asking. I'm not saying we're there yet, but you slip, you slide. If you slip, you slide. And if you want to pretend like it's not happening and pretend like AI is not there, managing you and now governing you, it'll be too late when you lift up your head. And you lift up your head from your navel. Read the Pope's thing. Let's talk at another time about where we are with artificial intelligence, where we are with technology, where we are with reparations. There are all of these things that important ideas that have been raised. And I'm very big right now on discussing important ideas. Now, in the recent weeks, locally, bringing it home, the Honorable Prime Minister announced a package of relief measures. It's a coincidence that I'm transitioning from AI speeches to the Prime Minister's relief measures. It's a complete coincidence. Because of the cost of living. And a lot has been said. A lot has been said already on this radio station. A lot has been said online. I don't want to retread a lot of what has been said. But I do want to take a few points. But the first thing I want to say is a lot of this, these increasing fuel costs and these things are out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines' hands. The fact that the price of oil is going up is not the NDP's fault globally. We get back to St. Vincent in a minute. The fault is geopolitical events beyond our control. War in Iran, war in Venezuela, policies of the US administration. We don't control those things. War in Ukraine, between or among Ukraine, Iran, Venezuela. You're dealing with Venezuela with the largest proven oil reserves, Iran with the fourth largest oil reserves, and Russia, which is fighting Ukraine, also a massive oil producer. Strait of Hormuz is closed. Things can't go in and out. There's nothing that Ralph Gonsalves did or Lorraine Friday did to make any of that happen. Let's be clear. I ain't saying that is because of Friday that gas price gone up. That would be a lie. But I also want to say that this is the job. This is the job that you get when you apply to be Prime Minister and you are hired as Prime Minister. True. This is the job. The job is not to manage in good times. The job is to manage in times of stress and crisis and tension. The job in a small country like ours is to manage our vulnerabilities and build our resilience. And the job is defined by what we do in these challenging times, because the challenging times are coming, always. If it's not a war overseas, it's a volcano. If it's not a volcano, it's a hurricane. If it's not a hurricane, it's a flood. If it's not a flood, it's a COVID. If it's not a COVID, it's a Ebola or a hantavirus. Nothing I said there is anybody's fault. But this is the job. This is the job that you sign up for when you sign up to be Prime Minister. These are the things that people expect you to deal with, to manage our vulnerabilities, to help us when we're down, and to prepare us so that we're more resilient when the next disaster or the next crisis comes along. And that's why, respectfully, I would say that what we have heard so far was too little too late. And I'm saying it respectfully. I'm not coming here to cuss anybody. Because what I hope is that if I come in a respectful, polite manner, we can have a reconsideration of some of the things that were done and not done, and maybe we can do a little bit more. Do a little bit more to help people. I read the statement many times. You cannot package a 25% increase in gas as a success. You can't tell me if I go into a store that we have a sale. It's a new sale, Memorial Day sale. And part of the sale is that everything costs 25% more than it used to cost. That's not a sale. You haven't done anything for me. You can argue that it could have been worse, but you have not eased my current situation, because my current situation is now worse than it was before. Okay? So that is linguistic talk. That is salesmanship. To say everything going up, thank me for that. I remember put the money where the pain is. You remember that? You remember put the money where the pain is?
Yep.
I remember, let me see if I could pull one up. Let me see if I could pull one up here. How about this one from, let me get a date for you. How about this one from the Searchlight? Rising cost of living shows that the government is out of touch with reality. That's not me say so. That was then leader of the opposition, Godwin Friday, who says so. Months later, the government has not implemented measures to actually reduce the rising cost of living. It shows that the government is out of touch with the reality of high prices and the hard times of our people. Let me say so. That was a man speaking with a different hat on. It's campaigning, not governing. Go on to read. Our people need support now. That was what was said then. This was August 31st, 2023. And he said that is why the NDP has proposed a 5-point action plan that would provide support to Vincentians. The government members are saying they are doing all they can. But I challenge any one of them to go on a walkabout, go into a shop, talk to people. They are worried about expenses and making ends meet. Our plan is the following, their 5-point plan. Reduce VAT, from 16% to 13%. I didn't hear that in the announcement. Number 2, reduce the custom service charge, the big tax on everything. Custom service charge was not removed. It was waived on a couple items, and I'll get back to that. Increase support for lower income families. Didn't hear anything about that. Reduce the impact of the fuel surcharge on VINLEC bills. Well, they have said that if it keeps getting higher, they will do something. But right now, they ain't doing nothing. And review the list of VAT items with a view to increasing the number of zero-rated items. Again, I didn't hear anything in the speech about that. What we heard were proposals that some of which sounded familiar because they had been done before under past administrations, and some of which were not dealing with any problem that we're facing now, but dealing with potential problems we may face in the future. Like, for example, when they said they're going to do something with the VINLEC, the fuel surcharge, if it goes over 71 cents. But it's not over 71 cents. It's at 61 cents at the moment. And even if it goes over 71 cents, which it has only ever done once in our history, as far as I could tell with my research. If it goes over, we'll do a little partial relief on the fuel surcharge. So right now, I'm acknowledging things are hard, but I'm telling you, you're going to have to bear bob with this one. Because if it get worse, we could do something, but we ain't going to do nothing right now. That doesn't jive. That doesn't fit with the talk of urgency that we used to hear. And I want that guy back. That guy who was willing to make these changes. And the reason that the gas price, the fuel price, is leaping the way it is, 25% at once, is because the government made a miscalculation. And I think we need to call a spade a spade. I'm not judging. I'm not criticizing. I'm stating a fact. There was a system in place where if the gas price goes up, it goes up at the pump incrementally. We had set in something called the 3-month rolling average, which means that you would take the average gas prices for a period of time and charge that average. Instead of it jump up by $10, we're charging you $10 more. It could drop down by $20, we're charging you $20 less. Because then you would know 1 week to the next what price you're going to meet when you go to the fuel pump. So there was something to even it out. It would go up, but it would go up more gradually. Unless there was a major thing that happened one time, which happened once in the past. But the government miscalculated and thought that this war in Iran was going to be short like the war in Venezuela. So when the gas prices began to go up, they didn't pass on the gradual increase to us. They said, leave it so, because Trump will sort this out just now, and the gas price will come back down. So just hold tight. And they held tight until Rubis and Sol said, we can't bring no more gas into your country because we're selling the gas at a loss. So that is why the gas has to jump up, because of an earlier abandonment of the 3-month rolling average and a miscalculation about how long the price disruptions will cost. So now we're in a situation where we are subsidizing. We owe the gas companies money for the past gas that we had them selling too cheap. And we're subsidizing the present gas, because now we have to raise up to make back money. If we had gone up gradually, we would be paying more for gas, but it would be less painful than going to the gas pump 1 week and it being $4 lower than the following week. There's a lot of talk about the 100% removal on of the custom service charge. We're reducing the custom service charge by 100%. We're taking off 100% of the custom service charge. I'll get back to the fact that that's not new or original. But I want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. When people say, because I saw all of this talk about 100% removal of the custom service charge, but I didn't hear at any point anybody tell you how much the custom service charge was. So if you talk to the average person who was listening, 100% removal sounds big. But if you ask that same person, well, how much is the custom service charge? They might not know. The custom service charge is 5%. That's what it is. It's a 5% charge. Is taking off 5% a good thing? It can be a good thing. But it's leaving 95%. And when you hear this talk about taking off 100% of the custom service charge, it sounds like a bigger reduction than it is. I'm not saying that they shouldn't take off the custom service charge. I'm not saying that a 5% off is not helpful. I'm talking about packaging now. If you tell somebody that you're lowering the gas price, but the gas price goes up, it does something for public trust. If you tell somebody you're taking off 100% of a tax, but when they come there, the product is the same expense, almost the same expense, it creates something in their mind. You feel like you're getting mama guy. And so I would say when you're doing something like that, it's just my humble advice. If you're taking off a 5%, tell them people you're taking off a 5%. People appreciate it without it sounding like you're taking off 100%, and it's a big thing. They mentioned also a task force that was going to monitor prices and so on, because some of the things it said, well, we're going to reduce some charges on shipping containers, for example, and that means that when the supermarket, when Mr. Graves or Mr. Bonady or Mr. Vera, Lanes, whoever it is, brings in the container full of chicken or whatever it is, rice, cornflakes, that since they'll be paying less for the container, they should pass on that savings to you. But they're hoping that happens. They have not and cannot mandate it to happen. So they've now tried to say, well, they're going to give this task force a role in keeping the prices low. That is not the point of the task force. The task force does not have the legal, the juridical authority to do the things that they want you to think it can do. And the task force does not have the manpower to do the things that they want you to think it can do. Thousands of products come into St. Vincent and the Grenadines every day and are sold in dozens of supermarkets. How is the task force going to monitor all of these prices to see whether or not and then make the connection between the shipping price of the container and the selling price of the product? How are they going to make that connection? And then even if they make the connection, are they going to then what? Go to Graves and say, lower the price? Graves will say, well, the container gone down, but the actual product gone up. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the container. That's just one element in my price build-up. And so I can't reduce the price. And the task force cannot make them reduce the price. So all of that talk is, if you wanted an entity to do that, you'd have to create legally an institution that could do that. The task force was created, let us remember, to advise the government on things that it could do to ease the cost of living crisis. We're gone now from an advisor to an implementer. We've gone now from somebody who will say, within the four walls of the administrative complex, these are our ideas, let us discuss them, to now saying, you guy who came up with the ideas, go out there yourself and make them work. There's a missing step. There's a missing step there. And I don't think that we should overpromise and underdeliver. And the task force cannot do, either juridically or from a manpower perspective, do what the Honorable Prime Minister is suggesting that it can do. And we need to be honest with people about these things. Now, many of the policies that were announced, great fanfare, are not new. Many of the policies that were announced are policies that the previous administration created and implemented on multiple occasions in times of difficulty. Now, when that was happening, the opposition was saying that they are insufficient. They're not enough. They are too little. People not feeling it. The government is out of touch. But the same policies that were panned and criticized are the same policies now that are being adopted. And I'll take you again to manifestos. I'll take you to the ULP manifesto and the NDP manifesto from the last election. And we can look at them side by side and see what we said we did or would do related to the cost of living. The NDP has a page in their manifesto. Well, it's like a half a page about tackling the high cost of living. It is on page, what is this now? Page 21 of their manifesto. The NDP will provide immediate relief, and raise wages over the coming years. Well, we know there's no salary increase this year in the budget. It wasn't there. But set that aside. This is the NDP's manifesto prescription or solution to the cost of living crisis. Again, I think the manifesto is still available online. It's on page 21. We, the NDP, will reduce VAT from 16 to 13%. Well, we see how that's going. Not happening. The IMF saying we can't afford it. And the government saying, well, they're going to study it and they'll get back to us by the end of the year. We will remove VAT on essentials like fresh food and medication to reduce the price of these products. Now, that hasn't happened. We will introduce VAT-free shopping days, 2 VAT-free shopping days. They did one. It was constrained by what was VAT-free, but they did one. But let me ask you, how is that VAT-free shopping day in December helping you today? We will remove VAT on domestic electricity, so bills are lower. Well, they didn't realize at the time that the ULP had already removed VAT on units below 250 units, which was the overwhelming majority of the country. So that was a non-point. They will pay a bonus to public servants. They will pay $500 to parents of each newborn child. I don't think that's happened yet either, but I don't know if that has happened. And they will provide a 50% import duty concession to public servants with at least 10 years of service to purchase a vehicle for personal use. I don't know if that has happened, but whether or not it has happened, that is not really a measure to reduce the cost of living for the average Vincentian. That is a special giveaway to public servants who have been in office, who have been working for more than 10 years. So that's not a real cost of living measure. And that's it. So the sum total of the proposals were reduce VAT, reduce VAT, reduce VAT, remove VAT. Public servant bonus, 500 to parents, duty-free concessions. That was the proposal. Most of those things have not happened, and most of those things, even if they happened, would not ease the cost of living challenge that we're facing right now. Now, that was one manifesto. The other manifesto, instead of 3/4 of a page, had 2 or 3 pages. Well, call it 2 pages, really. It says 3 pages in the manifesto, but really one of the pages is mainly a photograph. But page 57 and 58 of the ULP manifesto had a number of proposals. And interestingly, it says, as they discuss some of the things, and we'll mention a few of them, this is not a panicked or piecemeal response. It is a thoughtful, long-term, people-centered strategy built on careful planning and social solidarity. It addresses today's challenge while reducing the likelihood and impact of future challenges. And some of the things, I'm not going to read the whole manifesto. I urge you to go and look at page 57 and 58 of your ULP manifesto if you have a copy. If not, it's available online. Some of the things that were done: removal of VAT on a number of items. I'm not going to list all the items, but you know that the previous government reduced VAT. Something that the NDP said they will do, but haven't done yet. Remove VAT, this is the ULP again, remove VAT on electricity consumption below 250 kilowatt hours, effectively removing VAT on 85% of all domestic consumers. So it's only people who use more than 250 who pay any VAT at all on electricity here. Implementing cost of living allowances, we call them COLA at the time, to 2,500 vulnerable households to help offset increased energy and supermarket costs. Provided income support to over 6,000 households. Waived custom service charge for fuel imported by Vinlec, a savings that was passed through to the consumer. It was announced in the new speech statement by the Honorable Prime Minister as if it was a new initiative. But you see it here in the manifesto from last year. That is something that had been done in the past, the waiver of the custom service charge on fuel. Also, you will see that the ULP implemented a time-bound waiver of excise duty for diesel and gasoline. Again, that was announced as if it was a new thing. But again, that is something from the ULP, the previous administration's playbook. I don't want to say ULP NDP, because once you start to call party, everybody start to stay in their crease. I'm a ULP, I'm a NDP. Regular adjustments and pass-throughs to reflect the fuel declines in real time. Those were things, all of those things were done. Free fertilizer to the farmers. Free access to early childhood education, so parents don't have to pay to send their child to preschool. The measures to reduce the cost of home ownership. The raising of the minimum wage by 30%. The raising of public servant salaries. The reduction of income tax. The duty-free barrels, etc., etc. All of those were part of a cost of living reduction package that is far greater, by any objective measure. I'm not saying this politically, by any measure, than what was presented to us recently. Now, this manifesto, this ULP manifesto, says, what will we do in our next term? And they talk about consumer protection laws to prevent price gouging. This is the step that the Honorable Prime Minister now is dodging when he says that his task force will deal with higher prices. No, you need to pass laws. If you want to deal with price gouging, you have to pass laws to do that. You can't just say, well, we have a 10-man watching, go by the supermarket every day and see how much they're charging for, leg and tie, and we'll see if it goes up or goes down. That you need laws in that regard. Create fresh supply chains by sourcing materials outside of the US and getting some things from Central and South America, like, for example, chicken. Because most of our chicken is now coming from Brazil, which makes it cheaper than getting it out of the United States. This is an interesting one. Implement measures for the calculation of CIF values to ensure that freight costs do not exceed 2019 levels. If you listen to the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Friday's presentation, he said he was going to hold container costs at January levels to keep the container costs down. But what this is saying is that the ULP's proposal was to hold container costs so that they do not exceed 2019 levels. And that is the year before COVID shot all the container costs up into the sky. So that's not a new proposal, but it is a softened proposal that we heard now, because they're saying, well, we'll go back to January and we hold the January price. But the ULP had a proposal here that would go back to the 2019 price, which is the pre-COVID price, which was far lower cost for a 20 or 40 foot container. Operationalize the cargo port better, and certain investments in renewable energy, in e-commerce, have some incentives for farmers, additional incentives for farmers, institute some buy Vinci and eat what you grow campaigns and so on and so forth. And something else that they proposed, amend the fiscal responsibility framework. So the majority of the proposals that you heard were borrowed, adopted, accepted from previous proposals by the Unity Labour Party. However, many of those proposals that were made in the previous administration were left out. And that is where the nub of the issue is. Relief is not a buffet. You don't walk up to the buffet table and say, well, I got to take some rice and take some fish, but I want a chicken and I want a pork. You have to adopt everything wholesale if you're going to have the impact that you want to have. So, for example, I am respectfully urging, requesting, beseeching the government to consider another COLA, cost of living allowance, because the COLA is a cash allowance to the most vulnerable people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so that they can meet these costs with real money, not stories, not old talk, but real money. If everything is going up, it will affect everyone, but it will affect the poorest people more. And we have to do things for the most vulnerable among us. And if you put an extra $200, $150, whatever it is you can afford, I don't know what the fiscal situation is right now. If you put a little extra cash in the most vulnerable people's hands, they can maybe pay that light bill or go to the grocery store and buy that extra something that they need. So the cost of living allowance, which was helping ultimately close to 3,000 people, we had it at 2,500, But it turned out that it was actually 3,000 people who are getting colas. Do that. Respectfully. Do it for 3 months. See if you can ease up people's stress at the poorest end of our economic spectrum. How about another increase to the minimum wage? That would also help the poorest among us. Can we respectfully convene another wages council and take into consideration recent inflation, the increases of costs in the basket of goods, particularly related to fuel, and see if there's an adjustment we can make to the minimum wage to help the people earning the least to get a little bit more. It will be useful. Salary increase. I know a lot of people made a decision where they thought they were going to get a double salary in December, and they thought that the double salary would be worth more than if they got a salary increase more than if they got a 5% salary increase over the whole year. Turns out they didn't get a double bubble. And turns out also that the increase over the year would have produced, a 5% increase for the whole year would have produced more money. This is the first year in maybe the last 8 to 10 years that civil servants are not getting a salary increase. And it is at a time now when inflation is making your salary worth less than it was worth last year. I would ask the unions, the labor movement, to consider inflation, to consider the challenges being faced currently by their workers, and to request, maybe they've done it, maybe I just don't know, but to request conversations, urgent conversations on salary increases retroactive to January. It's important. We had a nice thing going where every year you could count on an increase. Maybe it would not always be what you would want it to be. Maybe sometimes it was 2% when you wanted 4% or 5%. Sometimes it was 3% when you wanted 5%. But every year there was an increase. And the increase and the inflation were moving in such a way that your salary shouldn't feel like less when month end come. I would urge as part of this effort to cushion the cost of living increase, that we consider the COLA, that we consider minimum wage increase, that we consider salary increase, and that we consider the cost of transportation, not just for people who have vehicles, but for people who take buses, minivans. We are approaching a point with the gas price increases, the 25% fuel increase, that the minibus drivers will not be able to hold strain and charge the same price for transportation to their customers. And again, this is the people who do not have automobiles, the people who are not well off enough to have their own vehicle or to be able to drive their own vehicle up and down, even if they have one, who take buses. We have to see what we can do to develop a mechanism to assist minibus drivers. There have been different proposals in the past. In the past, the government used to give the minibus drivers a subsidy on fuel costs. That's one option. Another option is to reduce other costs, registration for vehicle, tires, whatever the case may be, to make the overall operating costs for the minibus lower than it currently is. Because if you don't do that, the minibus operator is going to have to raise prices for travel. And if the minibus operator has to raise prices, then you're in a situation where the poorest again will feel it. We are not a rich country. but arguing back and forth about NDP, ULP. There are no wealthy countries in the OECS. Very few in the Caribbean, if any. But certainly none in the OECS. Not even Antigua and them that have higher GDPs. We cannot afford in our small countries to subsidize increases in the cost of living across the board. We can't afford to do it. That's a reality. What we have to do is have targeted, that's the first word, time-bound, that's the second word, measures to address the most vulnerable, that's the third, among us. Targeted, time-bound, vulnerable. Because we can't pay for everybody bills that go up. And if you spread it too thin, nobody go feel it. You'll be telling, oh, yeah, you get a 5 cents off because we spread it so thin that the only discount you feel is 5 cents. Or you focus it on the most vulnerable and you help the people who need it most, because that is what we can afford to do in our fiscal reality. You make it time-bound so that it lasts only as long as the spike in costs lasts. You can't do it forever. But you can do it for 3 months or 6 months, whatever the case may be. And you use objective criteria to target it to the poorest or the most vulnerable among us. Old people who can't work, single mothers, people whose income is below a certain amount, people who are already getting public assistance because they've been determined to be at risk or vulnerable. The disabled, people on fixed incomes, whatever the case may be, you develop criteria and you target the bulk of the support to that. If you just say gas cheaper, that costs the government a subsidy, but it doesn't target the relief to the people who need it most. If you say we're making containers cheaper, the government is giving up money that it would be getting from the tax that it could use to help people, and then trusting the supermarkets to reduce their prices. That's not a targeted measure. That is a general measure whose first benefit will be the business community and who you hope will then trickle down the benefit to poor people. Target the poor people. Don't target the business people. Target the poor people. Bring relief to them. Yes, you can always bring relief to the business community, but they are in a better position to withstand a shock than the most vulnerable people in our country. So I would want us to respectfully see if I see that they've borrowed a few things from past practice and from the ULP manifesto. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So that's fine. But I would respectfully suggest that more could be done in this time. I don't know when the Iran war will end, and even when it ends, the prices of fuel will not fall immediately, because the way fuel is priced, they buy something called futures. When you hear the price of oil and so on and so forth, you might hear the price of oil is $100, but people are buying futures where they're betting whether or not the price will be higher or lower. And so sometimes the futures market is saying gas is $100, but the actual market is saying the gas is higher or lower. The point I'm making is that the war will not end the fuel price challenge, because people buy fuel into the future at future prices. So the impact of the war on fuel prices will last 6 months after the war is done. And so we have to be prepared to put measures in place to help people, not up until when Trump says mission accomplished, but up until when the actual prices start to come down. So we should do that. Again, I'm not shouting, I'm not screaming, I'm not telling anybody they're stupid or they should do more or whatever. I'm just asking to take another look and see if there's a little more space that you can find to help the most vulnerable among us and to target the relief in that way. Minimum wages, cost of living allowances, increases in social assistance. These are things that we have done in the past. Income support, we've done in the past. These are things that we should be considering to see if we can help people. I want to touch very briefly on, because I believe it's almost 12 o'clock already and I have so much more to say. A whole bunch of other things that I want to deal with, but I'll just touch a couple more very quickly. There's been a little discussion in the media about sandals. Sandals paid $40 million for Bucament, and they paid $41 million for Mount Twin. So Sandals has paid $81 million for about 100 acres of land in the two places. And in addition to paying the $81 million, they have agreed to build 800 hotel rooms. They've already built 300 at Bucament. And spend $2.1 billion with a B, billion EC dollars, to construct those hotels. And out of that $2.1 billion, at least $500 million of that money will circulate directly within the Vincentian economy. And it will create 900 at Bucament and 17 or 1800 at Mount Win. That's 2,700 jobs for Vincentian. 2,700 jobs. This is not small investment, and this is not small impact. There's been an attempt by some people, led by Jomo Thomas, to smear the previous administration's efforts to attract foreign direct investment and to expand tourism. He has tried to, online and in print, to mix up my name in corruption, to suggest that corruption and kickbacks may have been involved in Sandals is coming here or setting up here or doing business here or paying what they paid for the property or whatever it is. You walk right up to the line of defamation and then walk back. But the concept that would be left in people's minds is that I was involved in some kind of scheme or scam or kickback or corruption with Sandals. If that's what you want to say, brethren, just come out and say it. Don't walk up to the line. Just say it, because we're both lawyers and we know what will happen when you actually just say it. So let's not dance around. If that's what you want to say, say it. He said a number of flat out wrong things. He said that in Mount Win, we sold the land for 14 cents a square foot. That was a lie. He came out later and said it was a miscalculation. Fair enough. But he said in an article in Sandals, he reposted it recently online. Somebody sent it to me. An article about Sandals in Bucament. He said this. I'm quoting him. Well, he said another lie. He said that we gave Bucament to Sandals for free. The exact words are: following the collapse of the Bucament Bay Resort, where hundreds of workers, state entities, and local businesses lost millions of dollars to the Ponzi scheme of David Ames, the government took over the site worth millions. It turned it over free of cost to Butch Stewart, Jamaican developer of Sandal Hotels and Resort. So the government turned it over free of cost. That's a lie. I don't know how else to describe that. It's not a. He could say that the 14 cents a square foot was a miscalculation. He pushed the wrong button on his calculator. But he can't say that free of cost was a miscalculation. That's just not true. He said or suggested that we had a special arrangement with Sandals where VAT is 16%, but they only had to charge 11% and they were pocketing the other 5%. That's a lie. Every hospitality entity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, every hotel, regardless of who it is, who owns it, whether they have an agreement with the government or not, the hospitality VAT is 11%. Everybody, every hotel charges 11%, not just Sandals. So nobody's pocketing is Paradise Beach or Beachcombers pocketing the extra 5%. No. So that's a lie. He said that access to private Mount-Twin was restricted by Sandals. That's a lie. There's a reason private Mount-Twin has been called private Mount-Twin for as long as I know myself. Because it's private. And there has been a gate on that property since the time of James Mitchell. And you ask permission of national properties that you go through to have a feta or whatever. And if you come up on your boat or if you walk through the side, you could have a little lime there. But Sandals ain't put up no fence there. He suggested again that I was involved in some kind of corruption. That's a lie. He's not the first person to rail against mass tourism. He's not the first person to cuss Sandals. And he's fully entitled to that view. I'm not arguing that. There are a lot of well-meaning people that I know who say, maybe mass tourism might not be the right way to go, and we're giving too many concessions to investors and these kind of things. It's a view. And those people should be heard, and they should be acknowledged. And if they have other proposals to hire as many people as the hospitality industry can hire, or have as many spillover benefits as the hospitality industry can have, then I think they should propose them and have them discussed. I think that's fair. Or if they have a proposal to make sure that more money stays in the country, more of the money that's spent by the tourists stays in the country, that's a conversation that I think is also fair to have. How can you keep more money while also attracting the investor in the first place? These are good questions to have. But if you're honest, we can have those conversations. And I think they're good conversations to have. Because they're right mind, right thinking people who have those conversations. But they're also dishonest people who have those conversations, and intellectually lazy people who have those conversations, and people who have other views, politically influenced views, who try to have those conversations. I don't want to engage with those people. I do want to know, not from Mr. Thomas, the things I would like to know about him, about the wages he pays his staff versus the wages people make at Sandals, but that would make the thing too polemical and too personal. So I leave that. But I would like to know of the government, straight up, and maybe if the Honorable Prime Minister had a press conference, somebody from the media could have asked the question and had it answered. Has Chatham Bay been sold? Because there's a lot of talk that Chatham Bay in Union Island, which is 100 acres of land, has been sold for 100 acres of beachfront land on the best beach in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. No, Chatham Bay is the best beach in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Salt Whistle Bay is the second best beach in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's my view. And maybe Lower Bay comes third before you reach any beaches on mainland St. Vincent. But Chatham Bay by far is the best beach in the country. And I've been told, and it's been rumored, that Chatham Bay has been sold to somebody for the 100 acres of land there for $63 million. I want to know if it's true. Because I've been also told that the person who is interested in buying it, or may have already bought it, doesn't want to develop it. They want to essentially preserve it, leave it as is. And there may be some arguments, environmentally or whatever. But I want to know if the land has been sold. We could have the argument about whether or not selling 100 acres of land that then will not create any jobs or any investment or any economic growth is a good idea. We can have that conversation. But let's get over the first hump first. Has it been sold? It's the kind of question that could be asked in a press conference if the Honorable Prime Minister had a press conference. But since he hasn't had one, I think we should just have that question answered. And the second question that I would like answered is whether or not the developer in Kanawan, Mr. Pinataro, has made a proposal to buy more of Kanawan in fee simple absolute, to buy it outright from the government, and whether the government has either considered that proposal or acted on that proposal. Kanawan has not, under its current lead investor, Mr. Pinataro, has not produced for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. No villas have been sold over the last decade, maybe. If not decade, certainly 7 years. No villas have been sold down there. Employment hasn't increased down there. Investment in the land has not taken place to the extent that is necessary. So therefore, the tax and VAT benefits and employment benefits that one would expect from an investment of that size have not materialized. And in the wake of in the wake of Hurricane Beryl, the investor in Kanawan, that investor, not the other one, not Mr. Dermot Desmond, the other one, Mr. Pinataro, has not done what he should to maintain his own property or rehabilitate his own property, or also has not demonstrated the corporate social responsibility to help out his community and the village in Kanawan. So in the wake of his failure to materialize his investment, his failure to bring the expected benefits, his failure to invest in Kanawan, his failure to help Kanawan at their lowest point after the hurricane, is the government considering an offer from that man to buy more land in Kanawan? It's a question that I think should be answered. I'm not saying they have, but I know that an offer was made. I don't know if they've accepted the offer. That's something that I think we should answer. And finally, there's some more things I have skipped ahead. I skipped over this thing about state-owned companies and not hiring your friends, only hiring those who qualified. Well, you could look at the list of boards appointments, and you could tell me whether or not those are our finest minds or those are our best connected minds. You can answer that question objectively. And you can also answer the question of if the NIS is doing better than it's ever done before financially, if VINLEC is doing financially better than it's ever done before, if CWSA, I believe, is doing better financially than ever before, but I might not be correct on that. If the Port Authority is doing better than it's ever done before financially, if all of these state-owned companies are doing better than they've ever done before, why was that? Is it because they had friends working there? And if it wasn't because they had friends working there, if it was because they had good people working there, how come the boards of those companies were replaced entirely? If your institution is doing better than it's ever done before, and another administration comes in and you want to change, some people, I understand that, that's fine. But change everybody? It doesn't sound, it doesn't ring true. But I don't want to deal with that. I want to deal with the issue finally. And I'm already over my time. So I'm going to try to be quick with it, and I'm going to try to come back to it later. I want to deal with the issue of debt. Because that's something else that has been making the rounds in our conversation. The debt to GDP and the sustainability of the debt in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Our debt in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is high, but it is manageable. It was spent on the right things, and it is on a downward trajectory if the current government does what the previous government had planned. Let us not get hysterical. What drove our debt increases recently? The construction of the port, which was necessary. If it was not done, cost of shipping would be even higher right now in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So the cost of the port was one of the reasons the debt went up. The cost of constructing the hospital at Anna's Vale was one of the reasons the debt went up. And the construction of roads and rehabilitation of schools was one of the reasons the debt went up. And fundamentally, the responses to COVID, souffre, and burial. Putting the money where the pain is, to quote our Honorable Prime Minister. The port, the hospital, roads, schools, disasters. That's where the debt increase has come from. All of them necessary either for economic growth or for responding to vulnerabilities. And that, as I said earlier, that's the job. That is the job. The job is to make our country more resilient, to make our economy stronger, and to assist people who need assistance. That's the job. You can't do those things unless you borrow money to do them. There is no country in the Caribbean that can do those things without borrowing money, whether you sell passports or not. Antigua's debt is for infrastructure and for human resources. Dominica's debt is for infrastructure, disaster response, human development. St. Lucia's debt, the same. Grenada's debt, the same. This is what you borrow for, and sometimes the debt will go up depending on the circumstances and the challenges and the crises that you're facing at the time. But what you do when your debt goes up in this Caribbean is not implement an IMF program of austerity to bring the debt down. What you do is you implement measures to make the economy grow. Because your debt to GDP ratio is just that. It's a ratio. It's how much debt you have judged by the size of your economy. If your economy gets bigger and your debt stays the same, your debt to GDP goes down. So there are two ways you can cut your debt to GDP in half. You can cut your debt in half, or you can double your economy. Either way, your debt to GDP ratio it benefits, and you don't have to do it with austerity. I'll give you some examples very quickly. Barbados in 2019, 2021, their debt to GDP ratio was over 140%. I hear politically them saying that the debt to GDP ratio was 169%. But the official IMF numbers that I see show that the debt to GDP ratio around that time was about 140%. Way higher than the Vincentian debt to GDP ratio currently. Way higher than even when they scaremonger and tell you it would be in 10 years' time. In 2030, sorry. The Barbados debt to GDP ratio was 140%. Now it is 99%. So you say, wow, Barbados debt to GDP was 140% in 2020, but it's 99% in 2025-26. They've reduced their debt to GDP ratio by 40 percentage points. They must have reduced their debt. Wrong. They didn't reduce their debt. They grew the economy. In 2020, when the Barbados' debt to GDP ratio was 140%, their debt was $13 billion. So in 2020, when the debt to GDP ratio was high, their debt was $13 billion. You know what's their debt now? It's $15 billion. So their debt has actually gone up between 2020 and now. But their GDP, their economy has also grown from a $10 billion economy to a $15 billion economy. So they didn't cut the debt, they grew the economy. And you grow your economy by investing in capital projects, by investing in people. You don't like the Barbados example? Let's look at Jamaica. In 2020, Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio was over 110%. Now it's 64%. You say, wow, look at how far down they've brought the debt. They must have really cut the debt. No. The debt in Jamaica in 2020 was 2 trillion Jamaican dollars. The debt now in 2025 is 2 trillion Jamaican dollars. The debt hasn't moved, but the GDP, the economy has moved because they have managed. I don't know what will happen now after the hurricane. You know, they'll have an impact. But talking about before the hurricane, what they did was invest in growing the economy and being prudent with their debt, not in engaging in hardcore austerity measures, slash. Because when you do that, you actually shrink your economy and your debt to GDP ratio doesn't change. Don't focus only on the debt or only on the debt to GDP ratio. Focus on how can we grow our economy. Will a port grow your economy and develop our people? Will a port grow your economy? Will improving access and transportation grow your economy? Will bringing more hotels, which will bring more tourists into the country, grow your economy? Will rationalizing healthcare in your country grow your economy and help develop your people? These are the things that you have to focus on. And then when your economy grows, your debt to GDP ratio falls, all other things being equal. So this talk about the debt to GDP ratio as if it is something that focuses only on debt is nearsighted. It leads to IMF austerity, and it is dangerous developmentally. What we need to focus on is what the Prime Minister always said, the former Prime Minister, Comrade Ralph: prudence and enterprise. You have to be prudent. You can't spend the money reckless, but you have to be enterprising and grow the economy. We are just coming out of a period where we had multiple disasters that we had to spend money on. When the IMF report on Dominica just came out, their debt to GDP ratio, I think, is down a little bit from 118%. But the IMF says Dominica's outlook is positive because they recognize the debt was because they were responding to Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma, and COVID. And then it will come back down because you don't have to spend that money again to build back the houses and all the rest of it. So mathematically, you can improve your debt to GDP ratio by cutting your debt, growing your GDP, or trying to do some combination of the two, the prudence and enterprise route. And for our states in the Caribbean, for highly indebted small states in the Caribbean, the most durable reductions in debt to GDP ratios have been achieved not by slashing debt, but by policies that try to hold the debt steady while growing the economy, the GDP, faster. That's the pathway that works in the Caribbean. That's what worked in Jamaica. The debt was the same, $2 trillion, but the GDP doubled. So the debt to GDP ratio went down. In Barbados, the debt has gone up, even though the debt to GDP ratio has gone down, because the economy grew. Some people say it's not just that the economy grew, but that Barbados changed the way in which they calculated their debt. So essentially, changed the way in which they calculated their GDP. So essentially, the Barbados Central Bank sat down together and said, let me go outside and find some more GDP. Are we measuring all the GDP up in the country, up in St. Lucia and St. Philip? And let me go measure some that GDP differently. They changed the way they measured GDP and then said, our debt to GDP ratio has changed. There's a lot of accounting work that goes on in coming up with that number. So don't let people trick you. In Dominica, they had to borrow after Maria. They had to reconstruct. But the IMF is saying they're on a positive path, even though the debt has gone up. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, COVID, Soufrière, Elsa, Beryl. IMF orthodoxy would have said, well, you have to come in and slash. And that's what you're hearing coming out of the IMF man's mouth now and coming out of the government's mouth. Debt. We had to slash, we had to cut. But we needed the airport. We needed the port. We needed the houses after the destruction of Soufrière and the hurricane. We need to build resilience in the country. So the debt increases, but our GDP increased as well. And the question you have to ask yourself is, would our debt picture look better if we didn't build the airport, if we didn't build the port, if we didn't begin the hospital, if we didn't build these roads? We would have less debt, but we would also have a smaller economy. We would also have less opportunity for people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to get jobs and to take care of themselves. That's. I mean, I could go on this, but I don't want to. Every country needs ports. It needs airports. It needs hospitals. It needs roads. It needs sea defense. It needs river defense. It needs climate adaptation. Those things cost money that has to be paid for by borrowing. And if you borrow for those things, you're making good investments in the future. If you were borrowing just to pay salaries, if you were just borrowing for what they call recurrent expenditure, that would be a problem. But if you're borrowing to invest in the future development and future resilience of the country, reduce vulnerability in the country, then you are investing in growing your economy. And that is what you want to do if you're the prime minister or the government of a developing nation. Watch the debt. Be prudent with the debt, but grow your economy. The debt to GDP in St. Kitts and Nevis was once over 200%. Now it's under 60%. Did they slash the debt? No. They grew the economy. And that's what we need to be talking about. Not focusing on just reducing the numerator. We have to focus on the development of the country. I'm not saying that debt doesn't matter. I'm saying that the sustainability of your debt depends on your growth strategy and depends on how you grow your economy. That's what I'm saying. Don't borrow your money for recurrent expenditure. Don't borrow your money to pay salaries. Borrow your money to build your country. Build your way to a better tomorrow. and make your people less vulnerable so that the next time the rain falls, the next time the hurricane comes, the house could stand up. The next time the flood comes, the bridge could stand up. The next time the pandemic comes, the hospital is in better shape. And you do those, and the future disasters, which are the ones that drive up your debt, the future disasters have less impact, and your economy is more robust, and your people are more resilient. That's the job. When you go around telling everybody who will listen, as a head of government, that the debt is unsustainable, that the country is going to hell in a handbasket, that the thing is not manageable, you create negative pressure on your own Ministry of Finance to raise money to develop the country. The budget that the government passed in earlier this year said they wanted to raise $200 million in bonds. The Comrade Ralph asked a question in Parliament, how far they reach all this? We're halfway through the year now. So if you're trying to raise 200 million, have you raised 100 million yet? No. 75? No. 50? No. They've raised 20 million out of the 200 million so far. Why? There are a number of reasons. But one of the reasons is that the head of government keeps going around telling investors that the debt is unsustainable. So why would I buy government paper? Why would I invest? Why would I create more debt for St. Vincent and the Grenadines as an investor if the Prime Minister is going around saying we can't pay the debt? Because that means that my investment might lose. It means that 5 years or 3 years from now, when I'm looking to collect on my investment, you might be telling me the debt is so overwhelming that I'm going to give all the investors a haircut. We're going to restructure our debt, and I, the investor, won't get back my money. So if you are a leader of the opposition or you're not in government, you can say, oh, the debt gone through the roof. All we going to hell is a failed state. When you are speaking for the country as the Prime Minister, you can't use that kind of political hyperbole because you will spook the markets and you will not get the money that you budgeted, and people will not get the projects that you promised them. If you have a problem, you acknowledge it, but you say, we have a plan. This is our plan to get out of it. These are the things we're going to do. Investors have nothing to worry about. We will continue to pay our bills, etc., etc., etc. But you can't just come out, the last government was so terrible, boy, mother walk. The debt so high. I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to reach 140%, 150% if we don't do something. No, don't do that. Speak rationally, logically, explain things to people in a dispassionate way. This is not a political realm now. Investment is not politics. Investment is numbers. Investment is futures. It's predictions. It's future benefit. And you have to convince investors that you have a plan to make sure that their money is safe, or they won't invest. The people buying your government paper won't invest. The hoteliers talking about building hotels might decide to wait a little longer before they build it. These are things that you have to consider, and these are the things you have to balance, and that's the job. I hope that we can continue to offer useful suggestions from where we sit now. I hope that some of my suggestions could at least be listened to. I heard the Honorable Prime Minister say he don't want to hear nothing from the former Prime Minister, and he ain't want to hear nothing from the Minister of Finance, because we know what we're doing and we mash up the economy. That's fine. But I hope that through that noise, some of these suggestions can still be considered. It's about building resilience, reducing vulnerability, increasing opportunity. In this time of challenge right now, respectfully, I think that more can be done to help the most vulnerable among us. There are examples from the recent past of things that have been done that we could do to help people out. The people that you're helping, they mightn't make the news. They mightn't go and tell people they got help, but they'll be helped, and it will be useful for the cohesion of the country if those people are helped in difficult times. Those challenges and those responses have to be targeted. They have to be time-bound. They have to be within our means. But we can do it. We've done it before. Vincentians are strong, but they need visionary leadership and policies from the government. Let us talk more about what some of those ideas can be, some of those solutions can be. And let us argue later about whose fault is what and who forget credit for what. That will come later. Right now, people need help. They don't need rhetoric. So that's my respectful submission. When I remember when I was Minister of Finance and Dr. Linton Lewis was in the opposition, he raised a question in Parliament about the contingencies fund. We didn't have a contingencies fund at the time. And I poo-pooed his idea. I said, how would I go help? The little money we could put in a contingency fund can't match the size of the challenges that we face in this country. And he was right legally and I was right mathematically. But him having asked the question, I thought more about it afterwards. I didn't say, I hear nothing from Linton. He running against me. He want to make me look bad as a finance minister or whatever. I thought about it and I discussed it with other economists and I discussed it with very talented staff in the Ministry of Finance. I discussed it with the Prime Minister at the time, Comrade Ralph. And we came up with something unique to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Contingencies Fund. And what we created was not Dr. Lewis's idea, but his question spurred an investigation, spurred thinking that led to the creation of a fund that is helping Current God?